So I was mentioning, and this has become a bit of a topic for conversation. We're going to talk more about this later in the show. But Sophie Durocher, who is a columnist with the Journal de Montréal, wasted no time as the new year began in posting her column, basically calling every English columnist of the Montreal Gazette out, except, because I looked again, for Robert Libman, who is also a Gazette columnist. He's on the line right now. Robert, thanks for being here.
A pleasure. Welcome back.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
Happy New Year to both.
Same to you.
Thank you, and to you.
I wonder if you take any pride in not having been called out.
I think it's only because she probably wrote her column on Friday or Saturday, speaking about the previous few days, because her column appeared on Sunday morning, I believe, in the Journal. My column only appeared on Saturday. So I think if her column was to appear on Monday, I probably would have been included in that basket, because she's gone after me in the past.
I would have imagined, though, you write fairly regularly for the Gazette now. She probably read some of your previous stuff. I thought maybe there's some level of respect here that I didn't recognize, Robert, as to why she's not calling you out by name.
I'm not sure about that. If she was a listener of CJD, I think she'd be calling you and Natasha whiners as well for pointing out some of these government actions, laws, legislation that contravene our charters of rights or preemptively invoke a notwithstanding clause or crippling universities, which should be a badge of honor for our city. I think calling those unprecedented actions by our government out is according to her whining. And if you read her column regularly, if you want to read whining, she and her colleagues at Québécois are constantly whining about anecdotally not being able to be served in French in Montreal or the Anglicization of Montreal, which to me is a myth or exaggerated. So somewhat of a hypocrisy here for her to call others whiners when in fact she's constantly whining about something that I think is grossly exaggerated.
I couldn't agree more. I also think, we are whiners, but is it fair to say it's largely justified?
Well, certainly, as I mentioned, it's unprecedented what this government is doing. It's almost surreal what's been going on. This misguided fantasy that weakening highly respected institutions such as McGill and Concordia that draw top researchers and deliver high-quality education, or that curtailing access to services in English and institutions is somehow something that's dangerous to French. It's ludicrous. We're living in this parallel universe which doesn't make sense. It's alternate reality, and I think they're the ones that need a reality check, not those that write about it and point out the facts.
It's interesting to note, and I know we used to talk about this, of course, when Jacques Parizeau was still alive, and the fact that other ministers, separatists at the time, had sent their kids or had gone to private schools. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Sophie Durocher, McGill grad, who also happened to get a master's in journalism from, of all places, Columbia, an Ivy League school in New York. Mm-hmm. Yet that never seems to come into play. It's kind of like what was good for the goose is not good for the gander.
I'm just not sure. The Québécois, they have obviously this political agenda, which is very troubling at times. To read them regularly is very discouraging for any non-Francophone in Quebec, and we see it on a regular basis. It's almost like they don't recognize the fact that there's still 1 million human beings that are non-Francophone that live primarily in Montreal and the Montreal area, so they will, from time to time, hear English in the city of Montreal. It doesn't necessarily mean that Montreal is being anglicized. In fact, 94% of Quebecers can speak French today, which is a major improvement over the past 30, 40 years. Instead of recognizing some of the gains that Quebec has made or some of the realizations that the Anglophone community has made as far as accepting and speaking French, that's something they completely turn a blind eye to. They're constantly picking away at the lowest common denominator, and it's a recipe for animosity and division in Quebec society, which is extremely unfortunate and unnecessary.
It's the perpetuating of the us versus them thing. I'll speak specifically here about Tula Dramonis's column that she highlights, where she was simply saying that Montreal there's so many cultures to celebrate and be proud of here, and from Spanish to Arab to Greek to Portuguese, Punjabi, everything. And then instead of sort of embracing that and seeing how it could be unifying and that most of these people speak French as well, Sophie Durocher chooses to seize upon the fact that no, we will always be a French city first and foremost. And she says it in almost a threatening manner, like, you listen to me very carefully, Madame Dramonis. What do you think is going on here societally that she feels this is the message that she needs to put forth? Because it sounds to me like it's coming from a place of fear.
Well, a place a fear or political agenda trying to shape or influence opinion of their readers, or suspecting that their readers want to hear that message, which I don't think they do. I think the majority of Quebecers, Francophone Quebecers, look at these issues very differently. All you have to do is look at any public opinion poll. The question of preservation of French or Quebec independence or Quebec autonomy or identity politics falls way below the list on some other bigger issues, and I think they'd be doing their readers much greater benefit if they zeroed in on some of the bigger issues and pressured the government to address those, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's economic matters. But with regard to the French language, I think education is the key. It's not a zero-sum game where to improve the quality of French or the presence of French in Quebec needs the diminishing or the weakening of English or the killing off of the Anglophone community. That's where they should be focusing on in schools and education, as opposed to picking on a minority which has been under siege for the past couple of years with this government.
Well, let's go back, Robert, before. So Equality MNA back in the day managed to get elected. So we're talking now, if we look back on a calendar, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, how much has actually changed between then and now?
As far as the proportion of, well, I think the big issue here is what this number they keep talking about is people that speak French at home, which is a misnomer, because obviously with immigration over the years and the aging of the population, Quebec has to replenish its population with people that come from elsewhere. But the people that come from elsewhere, as well as the existing Anglophone community, are speaking more French now. So instead of focusing on the percentage of Quebecers that can speak French, they're focusing on the number of people that speak French at home, which gives that false impression that the French is diminishing, when in fact it's perhaps the percentage of old stock Francophones that are diminishing. But that shouldn't be of great concern to those that want to perpetuate the French language, because as long as others, in quotations, can speak French, then French is alive and well in Quebec. And that's what their focus should be, in invigorating a positive attitude about speaking French, improving French being taught in English schools and in French schools. And that's where they should be heading, instead of just bringing out this old canard from the 50s and 60s about this class division between Anglophone and Francophone, because it benefits no one. From an economic point of view, cultural point of view, social point of view, we all suffer because of that.
But, we will take calls from time to time when there's a language issue that we're talking about, and people will say, if you want to go to the whining part of this, we whine, we complain, we make aware, yet we don't do anything with it. We don't have, in this particular case, a province that's going to do anything or take this, like the Equality Party did when you were there. So when I asked you how much has changed, there was enough resentment back in the day over how Anglos were being treated or how language is being basically shown to be an issue. How is it different now at all, Robert, this many years later, or is it?
Well, I think people now, 30 years later, are much more accepting of the fact that we've got to speak French. Most young people today speak French much more fluently than they did 30 years ago, and I think that's an important difference. And I think immigrants who come here recognize and have embraced the French language and speak French. But we still have our rights to protect, and I think the only thing that really would push this government or have any impact in the year ahead, this is what I wrote about this past weekend, are the courts. We have to fight for our rights. If no one else is going to stand up for us, the community has to fight for its rights as it continues to erode, because now we're looking at our institutions, whether it's McGill, whether it's Concordia, our universities, whether it's our healthcare institutions with Bill 15, and whether we can lose our bilingual status in these institutions. These are erosions that we've seen more in the last couple of years than we've seen in the previous 30 years. And that's why the courts are so much more important now. And we've got to perhaps bring this to the next stage. I think McGill and Concordia should be challenging these new measures in the courts, perhaps with an injunction, because Francophones will stand up for us to some degree. We've seen some support among Francophone editorialists. We've seen it over the McGill and Concordia tuition fiasco, but it's starting to dissipate. Our community has to stand up and be forceful. We don't have a tendency of doing that over the years, but I think the courts are going to be our only hope in the next year.
God, it's discouraging to just hear that, though, isn't it? That the courts are going to be the ones we have to rely on now, that there can't be a political party, a presence.
That our federal government would be able to stand up
that's
for
not
us,
happening.
That certainly hasn't been the case. We saw it happen last year, throwing us under the bus with the Official Languages Act and incorporating Bill 96 in the Official Languages Act in federal law. So they're not going to be supportive. Neither is the opposition in Ottawa. So I think the courts at this point our only ability to show some backbone.
Right, but ultimately then as individuals, it still leaves us feeling largely powerless and hopeless, and hence we whine.
Well, why point out perhaps to the rest of the world, hopefully. Maybe there'll be some resonance outside Quebec if things get to a certain point. The tuition fiasco has certainly hit in other jurisdictions south of the border and even in Europe. So perhaps if the government twists us too far, perhaps the reverberations will start to come back to haunt them later on. But at this point, the courts are our only salvation this coming year.
Yeah, we can only hope for another Pastagate issue so it can make it to the New York Times again, but I don't think that's happening. Robert Libman, Montreal Gazette political columnist. Of course, he's the former Equality Party MNA. Robert, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.